Good evening, my dear friends. The division of Judaism into Orthodox, Conservative, Reformed, etc. is artificial. For all Jews have one and the same Torah, given by one and the same God, though there are more observant Jews and less observant Jews. To tag on a label does not, of course, change the reality of the Jewish essence. These words were spoken by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. What are we talking about here? No difference between Orthodox, Conservative, and Reformed? Can't be. My tefillah, my prayer, and the prayer of a Reformed Jew are not the same. They pray in English, I pray in Hebrew. They keep the Shabbos, I don't. I keep the holidays and they don't. I consider yeshiva important for children and tarasim ishbacha, the purity of family, tremendously important, and they don't. What are we talking about when we talk about Jewish essence? Jewish essence to me means the soul and the travel of the soul through lifetimes and eons. The Jewish soul is different from any other soul. And whether or not you consider yourself to be Orthodox or Conservative or Reformed, in essence, in soul, you and I are exactly the same. And I totally agree with the Rebbe when he says, well, you know, things are different here, things are different there. Some are more observant, some are less observant, but a Jew is a Jew. Is a Jew. And when you ask a goy about what a Jew is, they really don't make a distinction about Orthodox, Conservative, or Reformed. A Jew is a Jew. A Jew is not a Christian, and he's not a Buddhist, and he's not a Muslim. He is a Jew. And when Hitler decided to go after the Jews, he didn't care whether or not he wore a shtreimel, or he went to shul every Shabbos, or they went to Hebrew school, or they didn't. A Jew was a Jew. And a yellow star was tagged on, no matter what their persuasion was. Arabs who kill Jews don't care what kind of Jews they kill and whether or not they're observant or not. They're Jews, and in their eyes, that's the enemy. I wasn't always religious, but I was always Jewish. And I remember when I was a child growing up in Germany. My parents are survivors, and I grew up in a town called Nuremberg, which, of course, everybody knows. And the Nuremberg trials, everybody knows. That's where I grew up. We're talking about from 1946 on, so after the war. And my parents stayed in Germany after the war, and that, of course, was a very difficult thing for somebody as Jewish as myself to understand, because on one hand, I was not allowed to play with Goyim and be with Goyim and interact with Goyim. And on the other hand, I lived in a country that was completely and totally saturated with Jewish blood. My father and I used to have fights and arguments when I was a child because I could not understand why he stayed in Germany after the war, and why, after 4.5 years of concentration camp, both of my parents were in Bergen-Belsen, and losing mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and cousins, they stayed in Germany. And as I grew older and as things became very clear in my mind, because how could they not be clear? And how could I not see what was around me? I used to argue with my father on a continual basis. And I used to say, where are your principles? On one hand, you live a separatist life, and we go to shul, and we keep kosher as much as was possible, and we observe the holidays, and you daven every day, and you lay tefillin every day, yet in the country where your enemies live, that's where you're growing me. I didn't have a childhood. I didn't have friends. I didn't have anything because I grew up like a virtual wolf child. I knew I was Jewish. And being Jewish became tremendously important because it made me different. I learned what that difference is by spending 16 years of my life in Germany. And I just couldn't be with German children. And I couldn't be friends with them because somewhere in the back of my mind, even when I was little, there was always this great big question mark of who was their father? Who was their grandfather? What were they doing during the war? Did they have anything to do with the fact that I didn't have aunts and uncles and cousins like other families? Did they have anything to do with the fact that my parents, in their house, when they were with their friends, always cried when they spoke about their families and about the atrocities that they went through? Did it have anything to do with me? Why should I have to suffer in that place? Why didn't my father leave? Why didn't we go to Israel like so many others? Why didn't we come to America years and years before that? And my father's answer, Zichrono Levacha, used to be, they have to pay. They have to pay what? And how? They have to pay with money. They have to pay with my father making a lot of money and having a big business and having a big office and our having a big car. Is that the payment? When I went to dancing school, that my father was terrified that I shouldn't dance with a Shagets, with a non-Jew, so he would come with me and he would dance with me. That was no fun. I couldn't understand growing up why there was such a big difference, why there was such a distinction between being Jewish and not being Jewish. But I did understand that my parents had numbers and that their friends had numbers and that their skin was forever tattooed because they were Jewish. And I understood that I got beaten up because I was Jewish. And I learned to defend myself when I was little, early on, because I was Jewish. And if somebody said anything, I was Jewish. I remember that I once went to a birthday party, and I love cake. I always loved cake. And at this birthday party, they were serving cake, and I finished mine, and I wanted another piece. And so I went over to the mother of one of these children in my house, and I asked for another piece of cake, and they gave it to me. They did. And then when I walked away with it, all gleeful and happy, I heard them say, "You see, the Jewish child, she's different from everybody else. One piece is not enough for her. They must be hungry." I wasn't hungry. I just wanted another piece of cake. And not because I was Jewish, but because I was a child. And just because. And so what? But the label was there. I was one Jewish girl growing up in my neighborhood. I was one Jewish girl in a school of 2,000 Protestant children. And I didn't go to school on Shabbos. So there were always problems. And if I misbehaved, it was the Jewish kid misbehaving. And if I did something good, then it was the Jewish kid doing something good, and there was jealousy. And if my father came in his taunus to pick me up from school, there were lots and lots and lots of comments because I was Jewish. It didn't matter if I was conservative or Orthodox or Reformed. I was just Jewish. But you know something? No matter where I've been in my life, and no matter what I've done, the being Jewish was always the focal point of my life. Even in the years when I wanted to blend into the woodwork, when I didn't want to know about anything, when I came to America at the age of 16, and I decided that I didn't want the tag anymore, and I wanted to be just like everybody else. And I lost myself in that. And I lost my way in that. And I lost my identity. Even in those days, the one thing, I would never go out with a guy. I would never be near many goyim. In other words, I didn't go to parties where there were goyim because I was afraid. There was always something inside of me that took me away from there. I've thought about this a lot over the years. And my life went the way it went, and there is no point ever crying over spilled milk because everything works exactly the way it needs to work. And Hashem, no matter what it is that it looks like at the moment, Hashem always, always makes it so it works out just right and just in the right way. I realized something very interesting in my life, that I've only been happy in two places. When I lived in Israel from 70 until 73, and now that I live in Crown Heights. And when I need to go out of my neighborhood, I'm not happy. I like to stay in my safe haven. I like to stay in my community. I like to be with my own. And I work with non-Jews, and I teach non-Jews, and I have non-Jewish friends, absolutely. But the real openness and the real closeness and the real togetherness that I feel in my heart and in my soul is only when I am with Jews. There was a time in my life when I was very, very much alone. I had just been through a divorce, and I had moved from Budapest to Kiev in 1991. And Kiev in 1991 was not the greatest place in the world to be. Bread lines, certainly no luxuries, but lots of great music and lots of great opportunities to do something else, something that nobody else did. I recorded for international labels, and I toured Ukrainian orchestras all over Europe and in the United States. I had an incredible opportunity. But as far as my social life was concerned, basically it was not Jewish. So I had to search out and I had to look for really what my soul was telling me I needed. And of course I found the Jewish community which was broken and destroyed by pogroms, by wars, by the Nazis, by the Russians, by the Bolsheviks, whatever. Just a horrible, horrible place, but a cultural haven. When I went to Babi Yar, the mass grave of thousands and thousands of Jews, I understood what being Jewish meant. When I went to graveyards in Poland and I saw graves overturned, destroyed, desecrated, I understood what being Jewish meant. that's where my soul made itself heard and said to me, do you remember who you are? Do you remember what you are? Do you remember why you are? Why you are? And my Yiddishkeit was reborn and tshuva began. I've always had this conversation in my mind about what a Jewish soul goes through if it gets lost. Think of all the Moranos. Think about during the Spanish Inquisition how many Jews became Christian and how their souls got lost for generations and generations. And you know what? A Jewish soul always knows it's a Jewish soul. And a Jewish soul always wants to come out. But it has to work very, very, very hard in every lifetime to come closer and closer and closer to being, to becoming what it needs to be and who it needs to be again. I have very close friends who are converts, and all of them and everyone that I've spoken to has told me exactly the same thing. I knew always that I'm Jewish. Where does this knowledge come from? Where does this desire to be Jewish come from? Why would anybody in their right mind want to be Jewish? I mean, look at our history. Look at our suffering. Look at what we've been through. Look at our losses. But the Jewish soul wants to be Jewish. The Jewish soul wants to come closer and closer to Hashem. The Jewish soul has a different light. It has a different spark. It has the spark of the chosen of Hashem. Why does the world hate us so? Why is anti-Semitism rampant in the world today as much as 60 years ago, if not more, in a different way, maybe more concealed, maybe more open? Maybe we're just not so aware of it because of all the other stuff that's going on around it. But let me tell you, the Europeans know. We live in America. We are blessed to live in America, in a free country. In France, you can't wear a yarmulke in the street. Wow. Think about that. Can you imagine a civilized country in Europe in the year 2004 and you cannot wear a yarmulke? Synagogues desecrated, burned, people beaten up in the street. What are we talking about? Germany? 1932? Are we talking about Kristallnacht? We're talking about Paris, 2004. It's unbelievable what's going on in the world. And it's unbelievable that the world allows, after what has happened, And after what history has shown time and time and time again, anti-Semitism to rear its ugly head. Yet, the Jewish soul wants to be Jewish. Ani ma'amin. I believe. They went into the chambers chanting, Ani ma'amin. Why? Because the spark of the Jewish soul wants to be near its Creator, wants to be near Hashem, craves the closeness to Hashem. And when a Jewish soul is reunited with Hashem, it is overjoyed. It is beyond happiness. It doesn't want to be anything else, and no matter what it has to suffer, it knows that its home is in Hashem's bosom. I read Tehillim every day. And every day, I see what it means to be a Jew. I read a chapter last week that I really would like to share with you. Chapter 127. King David instructs his generation, and especially his son Solomon, to be sure that all one's actions be for the sake of heaven. He also criticizes those who toil day and night in pursuit of a livelihood. That's the commentary. This is the psalm. A song of ascents for Solomon. If the Lord does not build a house, then its builders labor upon it in vain. If the Lord does not guard a city, the vigilance of its watchmen is in vain. It is in vain for you, you who rise early, who sit up late, and who eat the bread of tension. For, in fact, he gives his loved ones sleep. Behold, the heritage of the Lord is children. The fruit of the womb is a reward. As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of youth. Fortunate is the man who has quiver full of them. They will not find themselves shamed when they speak with enemies in public places. A couple of really, really, really great things in here. If the Lord does not build a house, then its builders labor upon it in vain. If your life is not built on Torah and mitzvahs and good deeds and kindness, chesed, you labor in vain. You may have riches, you may have big cars and big houses, but your soul is crying for something else. If the Lord will not guard a city, the vigilance of its watchmen is in vain. I wear the 10 Commandments every single day. It was given to me many years ago by a student of mine in Israel. And I'm in the airport, and a man comes up to me, and he says to me, this is just after 9/11, don't you think that walking around with that is a little dangerous? And he pointed to my 10 Commandments, and it's quite a big piece. And I said to him, I'm Jewish. I have the greatest power in the world on my side. What do I have to fear? The more you labor for Hashem, the more He gives you back. The more you think that you own, the less you actually have, because your soul is not nourished. You may drive the fanciest cars, you may live in the fanciest neighborhoods, but you know what? I'm happy in my apartment because it's filled with the warmth of Yiddishkeit. It is in vain for you, you who rise early, who sit up late, and who eat the bread of tension. Life is tense. It's difficult. I sit up late and I work hard. But I know that my labor is a labor of love of Hashem. And that Hashem gives me the strength and the koach to sit up late and do His work. And I'm not tense about it, because I know that tomorrow will be a glorious day because Hashem gives it to me. Behold, the heritage of the Lord is children. The fruit of the womb is the reward. If you don't teach children from the beginning about mitzvahs, about laws, about Yiddishkeit, about holidays, when they grow up, they won't teach theirs. If you don't give them the basis, the yesod for Yiddishkeit, they're not going to have it. Happy is the man who has a quiver full of them, and proud he will be if he teaches his children and gives them the opportunity to grow up with Hashem. And he will never be shamed when they speak with enemies in public places, because their souls will shine above and annihilate the enemy. Annihilate the enemy. The neshama ha'elokis, the neshama, the godly part of our soul, has to be fortified from early childhood on, so that when the tensions of the world, the troubles of the world, and the miseries of the world arrive, you have with what to fight. And we face those fights, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, every single moment of our lives, and he is after us, boy, in a strong and mighty way. And if you don't have the power to fight and the means with which to fight, then you're going to be sucked in. And you will eat the bread of tension. And you will remain in exile. And you will cry. And you will sow tears. You cannot imagine how difficult it is to know that you have no strength to fight, and that you're sending children out into the world that are not prepared for the fight. It's the onslaught of a goyish world. You can't keep them in the community all the time. They have to go out into the world. You can't keep them in the inner chambers of your house. But you can prepare them to give them what they need. Fortunate is every man who fears the Lord, who walks in his way. When you eat of the labor of your hands, you will be happy, and you will have goodness. When you do the work of Hashem, you will have goodness. It's the most beautiful thing in the world to sit inside a home covered with books, with a family whose children have been raised on the bread of Torah and the wine of mitzvahs. I didn't do it for my children. I can't redo it for my children. The days are gone. One daughter is already lost, and the other one is not here anymore. And when I think about what I could have done and what I didn't do, my heart breaks. But there is time to change. And for all of those who hear me and for all of those who listen to my words, maybe somewhere in your hearts it will stimulate the need to devote your time and your life to Torah and mitzvahs, and to give your children a basis for being able to stand in this world as proud Jews. Not as Orthodox, not as conservative, not as Reformed, but as Jews in the house of Hashem. I wrote a poem about time, because time is something that concerns me a great deal, and it concerns all of us, because our time on this earth is but a flicker. Time we treasure, we cherish. It moves in spite of us. Interfere we cannot, nor mold or influence, yet time is attached to the essence of all things. Time's meaning we ponder. Senseless, yet sensible, time blesses. It curses, revives and regenerates, destructs and instructs, educates, comforts, relieves, placates, consoles, deludes, fortifies, upholds. It forgets and remembers. It questions and answers. By time, a life is measured, and time bears the fruits of all labor. Time is a most precious thing, our most valuable gift. Time we waste so much of and can never recoup. It enslaves, yet redeems. Its flow decides our destiny. Time is a friend, an enemy, a paradox. Time is every purpose, objective, intention, every inspiration. We are irrevocably linked to it. For somewhere in time, because of time, all begins and all ends. You know something, when I write, I go into a completely different place, into a completely different space, and I think my mind goes all by itself. That's why I do a lot of writing, and I call it automatic writing, because after I look at it, I don't even know where it comes from. Actually, I should probably call it neshama writing, because I really believe that my soul goes on its own, and it decides what it wants to write on the piece of paper. And then I look at it, and I very, very rarely change anything, because I know that what is on the page comes from a much better, a much closer to Hashem place than my regular conscious mind, my everyday living. I'm so glad that I have this time to speak with you. I'm so thrilled that I can share my ideas with you. I'm so happy that you write to me and you tell me what you feel, and that somewhere down the line, maybe something that I say makes a difference in your life. I have a request, and I'm going to ask this many times, because I think it's something that eventually we will need to face. I've always asked myself, what is a Jew? And what makes a Jew so different from the rest of the world? Some of the things we talked about today, there isn't enough time to really go into that, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I would love to get your feedback on that. I would love to really delve into the conversation of what makes a Jew. Because I think that most of us don't pay attention to it. We're born that way, and so we identify that way, but most of us don't carry our Jewishness to any kind of height, to any kind of level where it really contributes something major to our existence. Most of us don't connect with that tremendous essence that we have. How many people do you know that say, we stood together at Sinai? Do you know what that means, we stood together at Sinai? At Sinai, when 600,000 Jewish souls, the core souls, received Hashem's Torah, you and I stood next to each other, receiving the word of Hashem. We didn't think about being conservative or orthodox or reformed. We were there. Not a single Jew can say, I wasn't there, because we all were. And our soul and the soul of our souls and the soul and the soul and the soul of those souls, we all were there. And we all have that divine spark of having been there, of having received Hashem's word, of having been inundated with the voice and the power of Hashem, of being in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, in the presence of Aaron HaKohen, in the presence of the law of mankind, from which all men, no matter what their religion, no matter what their faith, draw their understanding, their integrity, their laws. The Torah is the basis for every religion. The Torah is the wisdom of all the ages. And you and I were fortunate enough to be a part of those who received the Torah at Sinai. The greatest and most precious gift of all mankind. And you and I are a part of it. And it's our responsibility and our desire and the soul's desire to pass that on to future generations, to pass that on to our children so they pass it on to their children, so they connect with the beauty and with the power of truth and value and faith and Yiddishkeit. Please let me know what you think of who a Jew is. Please share with me your thoughts. Please be a Jew in all of your dealings with everyone, Jews or non-Jews alike. Let the power of Torah, let the power of mitzvot, let the power of our law guide your life, make you strong, give you happiness and joy in the feeling that you are part of Hashem, who loved you enough to share His word with you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And don't forget, please visit soulreflections-poetry.com and Music Visions International, musicvisions.intl.com, and write to me at soulreflections9@AOL.com. Be blessed.